with have to deal with is just and I'm going to call it, how to reduce platform and vendor sprawl. In this day and age, Rich, it's tough enough to compete head to head for, new client business. And what MSPs tend to do is continue to add more and more value to their service portfolio, to their value proposition in order to win that business against their competitors. And what that typically means, Rich, is they're adding more services, a heightened level of cybersecurity platforms, better and more, more efficient platforms for monitoring, adding more services and spending more labor time trying to become more strategic with QBRs. And as that solution stack grows, we tend to have a lot of this, what I call platform or vendor sprawl. And it's really the enemy of an efficient service delivery unit when you've got teams of people that are having to deliver service via multiple different dashboards and multiple different platforms that they're working in. And in many cases, Rich, we are not really good as an MSP community at truing up our rates as often as we should to keep up with the increasing cost of these platforms. So we've got a bunch of things against us as MSPs, and I'm going to speak for my MSP brethren and sistren, if that is a word, as I like to joke and say a recovering MSP myself, but the challenge has always been to add something more valuable that we feel will either increase our efficiency, reduce our platform or vendor sprawl, and maybe it costs us a little bit more, but in the long run, it makes more sense because it's better integrated with our platforms. It does better reporting. Maybe it helps us with billing and invoicing, right? All of these things, but at an added cost. And we tend to see these investments incorrectly as a quote unquote cost of doing business. So the tip of the week here is, how do we address this? Number one, let's try to reduce as much of that sprawl as possible. Let's look and review our stack. Let's look and review our, the numerous vendor relationships that we have as service providers and see if there's a way to consolidate or reduce that. And that may mean, Rich, looking at other vendors and other strategic partners that have better integrated services or solutions. So maybe instead of paying 5 different vendors for 5 different components or more of our total stack, can we get that down to one vendor that has all of these 5 things that are already better integrated, and then maybe even better integrated into our core platforms, our PSAs and our RMM solutions, and making it easier for our team to have closer to a single pane of glass ability to deliver service and the ability to automate a lot of the service that we have to perform manual labor. So maybe we love a particular platform and because of what it does, but it creates a lot of additional manual labor where maybe a different solution with automation, and we're on this show, we're talking about AI and machine learning a lot recently, right? Because that's the buzz. Are those newer solutions able to replace some of that mundane day-to-day repetitive work and do self-healing on tickets, right? We're talking about bots and things like that allow users to almost take care of some of the simple noisy type of tickets we get, password resets and things like that from an automated fashion to help them do those kinds of things. So how do we look at our stack today and all of the different vendors and platforms that we have, and how do we compare it against something that is better consolidated, better integrated, lowers or reduces that sprawl, and then allows us to, without raising our rates yet, that's the next step, to become more efficient, thereby more profitable, and then we can have conversations. The second step of this is to get the clients that aren't paying us what a new client would if we sign them tomorrow? How do we get them to true up? So now that we're actually more profitable from legacy existing agreements that may not be quite as highly profitable as a new agreement would be tomorrow, and become more efficient and profitable this way. And then the next step is to go out and get our rates up so that we can grow that gross profit margin that may be of interest to private equity firms and other folks looking to acquire MSPs and roll them up. As you know, Rich, the activity level for acquisitions and roll-ups in our industry right now is, if it's not at an all-time high, it's certainly close to it. The all-time high would have been right before the pandemic, I would say.
Yeah, this actually dovetails perfectly with the conversation we'll be having in just a few minutes with Prakash Panjwani of WatchGuard, because one of the things I want to get into with him is their unified security platform, their strategy for basically expanding the portfolio of products so that they can do more of those security functions for you and help you consolidate security around fewer vendors. They're not the only vendor with this kind of a strategy. Trend Micro, Acronis, Sophos, we could name a bunch of others. And that is being driven by the desire by, the need by MSPs to reduce that vendor sprawl for all the reasons that you talked about there. And it reminds me, back in the day when I was executive editor at Channel Pro, I did a story about the qualities that the fastest growing MSPs had in common. And one of them was standardization, both in terms of like workflows. We do things one way and everybody does it that way every time. But also in terms of vendor relationships and platforms. It's not always possible to say, I'm only going to have one BDR vendor, for example. But if you can, you're going to be much more profitable and you're going to set yourself up for more rapid growth. So there's just a lot of payoff to looking for that opportunity to reduce sprawl, consolidate, standardize when you can do that. And the best run, fastest growing MSPs I know about make that a priority. Well, with that, we are going to take a quick break, folks. When we come back on the other side, we will be joined by Prakash Panjwani of WatchGuard, their CEO, to talk a little bit about some of the moves they've made recently and to get his CEO level perspective on the state of the cybersecurity market out there right now. So stick around. We are going to be right back. Welcome back to part 2 of the MSP Chat Podcast. This is our Spotlight interview segment, and we are really pleased this week to be joined by the CEO of WatchGuard, Prakash Panjwani, for a conversation about what's going on out there in the SMB security market. Huge market, huge opportunity, and a lot of change all the time. Prakash, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you making some time for us. For folks who are not familiar with you, or as hard as it is to believe, not familiar with WatchGuard, tell folks a little bit about both.
Yeah, thank you, Rich, and nice to talk to both you and Eric here. So, yeah, I think that's great. So, I guess just first of all, I've been with the company for almost 8.5 years now at WatchGuard as CEO of the company, which turns out to be, I think, almost 1/3 of the company's tenure, which is awesome. And I think, if you're not familiar with WatchGuard, I think it's the best way to think of the company is kind of embodied in our mission statement. We actually call it our hedgehog. It's a reference to Good to Great book. And we used it when I joined here to kind of come up with a very clear mission. And if it doesn't pass the mission, we don't do it. And it's really around making enterprise-grade security accessible to all organizations. But Rich, you kind of mentioned SMB, kind of the focus, the mid-market, right, where it's not been accessible in the past, but also through a network of MSPs or IT solution providers. And if you step back, it has like three different components of the mission statement. Security has to be enterprise grade and made accessible. Secondly, to all organizations. So kind of, we call it democratization of security, right? It's how do you kind of bring it to everybody in the right way, but also through MSPs. I'm probably the only company that has an MSP in the mission statement directly, right? And we are very proud of that. And the reason is because we don't think we can reach that mid-market, right, without the MSPs to begin with. And so when I combine all those three things together, right, that's what WatchGuard stands for. We're at the intersection of those three things in a way. And everything we do is kind of bring those security solutions through the MSPs to the market. And it's been a fun ride, right? We have almost, in my 8 years, we have tripled in size and top line employees, however we look at it, right? It's been a very fun ride to realize that. And I think it's also a fulfilling mission because it is such a focused mission, right? We're not distracted by, we've acquired 4 or 5 companies, but everything is centered around, that mission statement. And if it doesn't fit, we just don't do it. And that just brings a lot of discipline to the company as well. And just unifies the employee base around that as well.
Yeah, I mean, you folks were known primarily for firewalls for a long time. The product line has expanded a lot in the last 4 or 5 years in particular. And in fact, what sort of inspired me to reach out to you folks and schedule this interview was an acquisition announcement that you guys made not too long ago, which I think is really kind of a nice setup for a broader discussion of what's happening in security right now for MSPs and for SMBs. So just to kind of set that up and kick things off a little bit, tell folks who SciGlass is and why you acquired them.
Yeah, so I think, so just continuing from the company a little bit, and I'll kind of tell you how SciGlass fits in and kind of how it fits in the strategy we've been working on for now several years. So when we kind of set that mission statement I talked about, when I joined here, one of the things we got are, backed by some amazing investors, and they said, look, you stay focused on the mission, but let's expand the portfolio, right? Because to make security accessible, like how do we actually do it? So we went about really creating what we call now the unified security platform. And to us, it was very important that the sum of the parts be, better than the parts themselves. And when you think about that strategy, it was around, hey, we got to have network, which we already did. We got to cover endpoint, which we got there through an acquisition a few years ago of Panda. And we had to cover identity, which we also started with a small acquisition, but made into a strong solution now as well. So those 3 pillars had to be in the platform for us to even say that we are a unified security platform company. And the beauty of that strategy is once you get the platform, it's like, you're addicted now, right? You're in, and there's always more to do, right? There's always a next thing that you want to add value around. So when we got the platform together, we released ThreatSync, which is our XDR layer, which is a very critical piece of why the sum of the parts are better than the parts themselves, right? Which is, as a platform vendor, you're able to take network events, endpoint events, and now we're even adding authentication events. You have all this rich telemetry, and you can actually act on it, right? Across all those points. You can take action on the network side, you can take action on the endpoint side, and truly the detection response capabilities truly come through. So as we got deeper and deeper into XDR, one of the things we kind of realized that we didn't have is NDR, right? Which is the network detection and response capabilities. And it's really around, at a very high level, it's a use case that started in, once again, like anything else, the high-end enterprise, because it's around, hey, we don't see a lot of the traffic. And even when you have the best firewalls, even best configured firewalls, you're kind of missing out on east-west traffic. You're missing out on cloud traffic that's coming into the network as well from switches and everywhere else. And NDR kind of started that as a technology around how do you actually detect and respond to network anomalies. Challenge was, once again, nothing that really appealed to the mid-market directly. Very little deployment in there for NDR. And what attracted us to SciGlass, and we started this conversation almost 2 years ago with them, is you meet them, and very first thing they said is, we want to make it accessible to mid-market. That's what we've been focused on. And as we got deeper into diligence, we realized that they were actually the embodiment of what we believe in, which is to make it accessible has to be cost neutral to the cost effective for the MSP to deploy. And when I think of cost, it's licensing, but also the deployment and ongoing management of the solution. And these guys did an amazing job of kind of getting that there by just the way they deploy it. It's all cloud-based, it's tenant-based, which is how we do our XDR as well. So the architecture, the fit was great. So that's the first reason, which was just bring NDR into the portfolio, and there was a great fit. But it also opens our door for the next step in evolution of the company, which is, even though we have great XDR built around WatchGuard platform, the next step is open XDR, right? Which is the ability to actually ingest traffic or data or telemetry from other places as well.